You spent $3,000 on a log splitter last spring. You did your research, you watched the videos, you read the reviews on the big box store website, the ones with 4.5 stars and 112 people saying it split their firewood just fine. You brought it home, hooked it up, and for the first 2 weekends it was everything you hoped it would be. Then the hydraulic cylinder started weeping fluid. Then the beam started flexing under load. Then the cycle time that the manufacturer advertised turned out to be the cycle time with no wood in the machine, because the moment you put a knotty piece of red oak in front of that wedge, the whole machine slowed down to something that felt like it was apologizing to you. By the end of the season, you had a machine that technically still worked, but left you spending twice as long at the wood pile as you planned. And you knew, somewhere in your gut, that it was never going to last another 3 years. That is not a story about a bad decision. That is a story about a market that has spent 20 years selling homeowners the appearance of quality while building machines designed to survive just long enough to be outside the return window. If this is the kind of thing nobody tells you at the equipment dealer, subscribe to Split and Saw, because every single video on this channel exists to give you the real answer before you spend $1 you cannot get back. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss it. Here's what nobody in that equipment dealership is going to say out loud. The machines that professional firewood dealers buy for their own property, not for the rental fleet, not for the crew to beat on, but for their own wood. The pile they are putting up for their own family, or for the premium customers they care about keeping. Those machines are almost never the brands you see at the home improvement store. They are almost never the machines advertised on television. They are the machines that show up in the back of the barn with 10 years of sawdust on them and still split a full cord before lunch without a single hiccup. 2 of those machines are what this video is about. One comes from England, one comes from Canada. And if you have never heard of either of them, that is exactly the point. Timberwolf has been building log splitters in Bury St. Edmunds, Suffolk, England since 1989. That is not a piece of trivia. That is the entire story of why this machine is different from what you find at most dealers on this side of the Atlantic. The company started because a man named Mike Burgess needed a better way to process firewood on his own property and could not find a machine that met his standards. So he built one, and then people started asking him to build one for them. That origin matters because it means the design philosophy of every Timberwolf machine goes back to someone who was personally frustrated by the same problems you are frustrated by right now. Slow cycle times, hydraulic systems that could not handle sustained commercial use, beams that twisted under real hardwood loads. Timberwolf was not started by an investor who saw a market opportunity. It was started by someone who needed a tool that actually worked, and that DNA is still in every machine they build. The TW2 is a 27-ton horizontal and vertical log splitter powered by a Honda GX390 engine. That engine choice alone tells you something. The GX390 is the engine that professional equipment manufacturers reach for when they need reliability over thousands of hours, rather than low purchase price. It is the same engine you find in commercial pressure washers, industrial water pumps, and professional-grade concrete equipment. Honda builds the GX390 in a facility in Suzuka, Japan, where precision tolerances are held to standards that most small engine manufacturers do not even attempt. The result is an engine that will routinely run past 1,000 hours with basic maintenance, which on a log splitter used by a serious firewood producer means it will likely outlast the hydraulic system underneath it. Timberwolf pairs that engine with a hydraulic system they design and source specifically for their machines, not a generic system pulled from a catalog and bolted on to keep costs down. The pump, the cylinder, the control valve, and the beam are all sized and rated to work together as a system rather than as a collection of components that happen to be attached to the same frame. The cycle time on the TW2 is what professional users talk about first. A full cycle, meaning the wedge goes forward through the wood and returns to the start position ready for the next piece, takes approximately 12 seconds. That number matters because most homeowner-grade machines sold in the same price neighborhood advertise cycle times that are measured under ideal conditions with no load. The Timberwolf number is a real working number. 12 seconds a cycle means you are processing roughly 5 pieces of firewood per minute under normal conditions. If you are splitting to an 18-inch length and your average round is a moderate diameter, you are looking at somewhere between half a cord and a full cord per hour, depending on your wood, your setup, and how fast you can feed the machine. For a firewood dealer processing 10 to 15 cords a week, that throughput is not a luxury. It is what separates a profitable day from a day where you are still in the yard at 8 in the evening wondering why you got into this business. The beam on the TW2 is a fabricated steel I-beam, rated for the full 27-ton output of the hydraulic cylinder. That sounds like it should be standard. It is not. A significant number of machines in the 25 to 30-ton range, sold through home improvement channels, use beams that are technically rated for the load, but with so little safety margin that sustained use causes microflexing that progressively weakens the weld points over time. Timberwolf uses a beam cross-section that is substantially heavier than what the minimum rating requires, because the engineers who designed it had processed enough firewood themselves to know that the rating and the real world are two different conversations. The splitting table height on the TW2 is designed so that a working adult does not need to bend down to load rounds, which sounds like a small comfort until you have spent 4 hours at a splitter and your lower back is having a very direct conversation with you about your life choices. The machine is towable and designed for use at multiple locations, which matters for the firewood dealer who splits at the landing, at the woodlot, and at the delivery yard depending on the season and the customer. The hydraulic oil system on the TW2 is sized to run all day without overheating because thermal stability in the hydraulic circuit is one of the first things to degrade on cheaper machines and one of the last things manufacturers will tell you about in their marketing materials. When hydraulic oil gets too hot, the viscosity drops, the pump starts cavitating, seals wear faster, and the whole system starts behaving like it is tired. Timberwolf built the fluid capacity and the heat management into the system from the design stage, rather than treating it as an afterthought. That is an engineering decision that costs money at the manufacturing stage and saves money over the life of the machine. It is also the kind of decision you only make if you actually intend for the machine to be running 10 years from now. The reason most buyers overlook Timberwolf is simple. The machines are not on the shelf at the big box store. They are not in the seasonal display next to the bags of wood pellets in October. They are sold through a network of specialty dealers who tend to be smaller operations focused on commercial and professional customers. The price point for the TW2 is in the range where a homeowner doing 2 cords a year looks at it and thinks that is too much machine for me. And they might be right. If you are doing 2 cords a year, there are machines that will serve you adequately for less money. But if you are doing 20 cords a year, or 50, or if you are a property owner who heats primarily with wood and wants a machine that will be in the same barn in 15 years without having been rebuilt twice, the TW2 is the conversation you should be having. Before we keep going, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer this in the comments below. Have you ever spent real money on a log splitter or a chainsaw, taken it home, put it to work, and watched it fall apart in the first season? Because if that happened to you, you are not alone, and you are not stupid for trusting the brand on the label. Drop a comment right now and just say, "I got burned." That is it. 3 words. Because every person who reads that comment is going to feel less alone, and you are going to help somebody else avoid making the same mistake. I read every single comment on this channel. Now let us talk about Wallenstein. And specifically, let us talk about why the LX525 represents a completely different philosophy about how you should be splitting firewood if you already own a tractor. Wallenstein Equipment has been building tractor-mounted and PTO-driven implements in Elmira, Ontario since 1985. Elmira sits in the middle of Waterloo region, in the heart of some of the most productive agricultural land in Canada, surrounded by farming families who have been working that land for generations and who have a very low tolerance for equipment that looks good on paper and falls apart in the field. The Mennonite farming community in that region has a long history of building things that last because they build things they intend to use themselves. And Wallenstein grew out of that tradition of practical, no-nonsense manufacturing. The company is privately held. It does not have shareholders demanding that the cost of the hydraulic cylinder be reduced by $8 to improve quarterly margins. It has customers who come back and buy another machine because the last one is still running 20 years later. The LX525 is a 25-ton 3-point hitch log splitter designed to be powered by the PTO of any compatible tractor in the 25 to 75 horsepower range. That power requirement covers an enormous range of tractors, from a modest compact utility tractor all the way up to a serious mid-size farm tractor. If you already own a tractor in that range, you already own the engine for this machine. You are not buying a second engine, a second fuel tank, a second air filter to service, a second set of spark plugs to change, a second battery to keep charged over winter. You are using the power source you already paid for and already know how to maintain. That is not a small thing. For a firewood dealer who is already running a tractor for land management, mowing, and moving material around the property, Adding a PTO-driven splitter is a force multiplication of an asset they already own, rather than the addition of a new maintenance commitment. The hydraulic system on the LX525 is driven entirely by the tractor PTO, which means the output of the system is directly tied to the power being delivered from the tractor. At the rated PTO speed, the LX525 delivers a genuine 25 tons of splitting force through a hydraulic cylinder and wedge setup that Wallenstein engineers specifically for this kind of sustained professional use. The beam construction on the LX525 uses heavy-gauge formed steel that Wallenstein fabricates in their Elmira facility, not subcontracted overseas and inspected on arrival. The welds on Wallenstein equipment have a reputation in the farming community in Ontario and across the upper Midwest that goes back decades. These are not pretty welds made for a product photograph. These are deep penetration structural welds, made by people who understand that the next person to use this machine is probably going to be the same person who built it, or their neighbor, or their son. The cycle time on the LX525 at full PTO speed is in the 9 to 11 second range, which puts it on par with or slightly faster than many standalone gas-powered machines in the same tonnage class. That is because the PTO system, when matched to a tractor that is running at its rated speed, delivers a consistent hydraulic flow that a standalone engine often struggles to maintain under continuous load over a long day. A gas engine on a standalone splitter is running its cooling system, its ignition system, and its hydraulic pump all simultaneously. And on a hot day with no shade, that engine is working harder just to keep itself together. The tractor doing the same work is a larger engine with a larger cooling system designed for sustained field work. And it simply does not care about the ambient temperature the way a small displacement single-cylinder engine does. The splitting table height on the LX525 is adjustable, which matters more than you might think if you have ever spent a full day splitting wood with a machine set up for someone 6 inches shorter or taller than you are. Wallenstein built in that adjustability because the farmers and firewood producers they were designing this machine for told them it mattered. That is the kind of feedback loop that happens when a manufacturer is physically located in the community that uses the product, rather than separated from it by an ocean and a distribution network. The log cradle on the LX525 is substantial enough to hold a large round securely while you position the wedge, which reduces the fumbling and repositioning that adds up to real-time loss over the course of a long day. This is a small detail that takes manufacturing cost and engineering time to get right, and Wallenstein got it right because they were paying attention to how the machine actually gets used rather than how it looks in the catalog photograph. The LX525 is also designed to be stored and transported as part of your tractor's implement inventory, which means when you are done splitting for the season, you are not looking at a standalone machine taking up floor space in the barn. You detach it from the 3-point hitch, store it in a corner, and the tractor is available for whatever comes next. For a working property owner who is managing multiple tasks across multiple seasons, that flexibility is genuinely valuable. You are not managing a separate piece of equipment with its own storage requirements, its own winterization checklist, and its own service schedule. The splitter is an implement, the tractor is the machine. And the tractor is already earning its keep the other 10 months of the year. The reason most buyers overlook the LX525 is that it requires you to already own a compatible tractor. And for buyers who do not have one, that is a legitimate barrier. But for the property owner or firewood dealer who does own a tractor and is shopping for a standalone gas-powered splitter, the LX525 deserves serious consideration before that purchase is made. The price of the LX525 is in a range that, when you subtract the cost of the engine you are not buying and the maintenance you are not taking on, represents genuine value. Wallenstein sells through a network of dealers that tends to be concentrated in agricultural and rural areas, which means if you are in suburban New England or the Pacific Northwest, you may need to make a phone call to find one. That dealer network reflects the reality of who this machine is built for. It is built for working farms, working properties, and working firewood operations, not for the homeowner who occasionally wants to feel like a lumberjack on a Saturday afternoon. There is something worth saying about the broader category of equipment that both of these machines represent. The log splitter market in North America is enormous. Hundreds of millions of dollars change hands every year as homeowners and small property owners buy machines at big box stores and equipment rental centers. The vast majority of those machines are built to a price. The manufacturers know exactly how many hours of use the average homeowner is going to put on a machine before it sits in the corner for a decade, and they build to that expectation. There is nothing dishonest about that. It is responsive to what the mass market will pay. But if you are not the average homeowner, if you are someone who is going to put 100 cords through a machine in the next 3 years, you are buying the wrong product when you buy for that market. The TW2 and the LX525 exist in a different category. They are built for the person who needs the machine to work every time, all day, for years, without being a project unto itself. The Firewood dealer who is running 200 cords a season cannot afford a machine that gives him hydraulic trouble in October when the calls are coming in and the forecast is showing the first hard freeze of the year. The property owner heating an old farmhouse through a Minnesota winter with cordwood cannot afford a machine that starts weeping oil in January and requires a 3-week wait for a warranty repair that the manufacturer may or may not honor without an argument. These machines are not perfect. No machine is. But they represent a manufacturing philosophy that starts with the assumption that the person buying this machine is going to use it seriously, and that the machine had better be prepared for that. What also sets these two machines apart, beyond the engineering, is the serviceability. Both Timberwolf and Wallenstein build machines where the components that wear and the components that can fail are accessible and replaceable without sending the machine back to the factory or waiting on proprietary parts that only the original manufacturer stocks. Hydraulic seals, control valves, cylinder components, all of these are available through the dealer networks both companies maintain. That matters enormously over the lifespan of a machine. A machine that costs more at purchase but whose parts are available and whose dealers actually know how to work on it is a fundamentally different economic proposition than a machine that costs less at purchase, but whose hydraulic cylinder cannot be rebuilt at the local shop, and whose manufacturer has changed the part numbers 3 times in 5 years. The Timberwolf TW2 is the machine you buy when you want a self-contained professional-grade log splitter that is going to run on its own, power, move around your property and to your woodyard, and process serious volume day after day without asking much of you beyond basic maintenance and clean fuel. It is a machine built in England by people who have been doing this specific thing for 35 years, powered by an engine that Honda has been refining for decades, and that every mechanic in rural America already knows how to service. It is not cheap. It is not supposed to be cheap. It is supposed to be the last log splitter you buy. The Wallenstein LX525 is the machine you buy when you already own a tractor, and you want to use that power plant to its fullest potential without adding another engine to your maintenance roster. It is built in Ontario by a company that has been selling into the toughest farm and forestry markets in North America for 40 years, and whose reputation in those markets is built entirely on machines that kept working when cheaper alternatives did not. It is faster per cycle than most standalone machines in its class. It stores cleanly, it mounts and dismounts in minutes, and it delivers genuine 25-ton force through a hydraulic system that was engineered to last rather than engineered to a price. If you have been thinking about upgrading your log splitter, and you have been assuming that the answer was somewhere in the aisles of the home improvement store, I hope this video gave you a reason to stop and look at what the professionals who do this for a living are actually choosing. The next video I would point you toward goes deep on what to look for in a log splitter before you buy, the specific questions you should ask any dealer that most buyers never think to ask, and the #1 mistake people make when they buy based on tonnage rating alone. Go watch that one next. You will not regret it.